Hello, this is the Fracture Tool Tutorial Section 2 for the UDK May 2011 release. My name is Barrett Hudson. I'm a student at the Guildhall at SMU in Cohort 16, and today is June 4th, 2011. When we left off last time, we had just sliced our static mesh and exited the Fracture tool, and we were still in our static mesh editor window. So that's where we'll pick up, is here in our static mesh editor window. And before we add our fractured static mesh to our game, there's a couple properties in here that we need to adjust. The first two are down here at the bottom. We need to uncheck use simple box collision and use simple line collision. This is important because if these two are not unchecked, then when we blast pieces off of our static, it will not adjust the collision boundaries. So the pieces will move, but the collision will stay where it was initially, which will create some odd effects. So always make sure that those are unchecked when you create a fractured static so that it behaves properly with collision. The next thing we want to do is go up here to where we see LOD Info, and this is where basically materials are applied to static meshes. So if we expand this out, we have to expand it out a couple times so we get down to the elements. We'll see element 0 and 1. You'll see element 0 has material applied to it, and element 1 says material none. So we expand both of these out. Basically, element 0 represents the outside of our static mesh here, which, as you can see, clearly has a texture on it. Because we can see it, and it's not just the purple and white boxes that is the default texture in UDK. Whereas element 1 represents the internal faces of the fractured chunks. So when this breaks apart, there's of course going to be edges and pieces that we can't see right now because they're inside the current static mesh. And those are controlled by the material in element 1, which is currently set to none, which would give us the result of, when we broke this apart, we would see just the purple and white default texture, which isn't really what we're going for. So to fix this, we need to assign a material to element 1 here, and the easiest way to do that is just to give it the same material that's on the exterior of the mesh. So we can go to easiest way to do that is go to element 0 here where it says material, and click this, right click and copy it, come down to element 1 and right click and paste, and that will go ahead and apply that texture. And if we click off, we see that here in material, in element 1, and this now says material equals our material. So with those two changes made, we can go ahead and exit out of our static mesh editor and save off our changes so that we make sure they get incorporated into the static mesh. And then with our fractured static mesh selected, we will right click in our world and we select add fractured static mesh from the drop down menu when you right click, and we see our fractured static mesh appear in our world. So the next step is to build all so that this thing will pick up the lighting in the level so we can see it when we go to playtest. Okay, our build is done. We can go ahead and right click and say play from here. And as you can see, we have our static mesh here, and we can run into it and we get some basic collision. We can run through it. Our collision and everything is just like it would you'd expect from our static mesh. But we can go ahead and shoot it and break some pieces off. And we shoot some more pieces off, we can start to see it kind of break apart and fall down, and we can see it pop apart. And we've got our fractured static mesh, and we now got destroyable statics. That concludes the Fracture Tool tutorial. Basically, we've covered how to take a static mesh and turn it, using the Fracture tool, turn it into a fractured static mesh with chunks, and put that in the game and break it apart a little bit. Thank you for watching this tutorial.